So I'm Nathan Richards, and my farming partner and wife Alicia Miller, and we're at Troed farm in Ceredigion in West Wales, and we're organic farmers and growers. With most of our work is in growing, but we also keep livestock here as well. And we are certified organic with the Soil Association, which are our local, which is the largest of the United Kingdom certifiers. And we grow a lot of vegetables here, which we sell locally. And we have been in place here. We bought this farm in 2008, at the end of 2008.
And, the farm has a long history, which I think is quite wonderful, going back, we know at least until the 1780s. And, when we bought the farm, it was not in good heart. It hadn't been farmed for years. And, I think we've done something important by reviving it and making it a proper farm again.
Yeah. Yeah, we both had very different backgrounds originally, though I'd be hugely influenced by an experience that I had as a child, where I'd first come to West Wales. I grew up in a city, in a big industrial city on the south coast of England. I never thought I could farm. But in the 1970s, when I was about 10, I came out to West Wales. I have an uncle and aunt who were early back to the landers, those early 1970s back to the landers, who were really interested and were organic farmers. And the starting of the sort of organic farming movement in the 1970s. And I was very lucky to come here. And I was hugely influenced by that through a child's eyes, but never thought I could get into this myself. And I left school when I was very young. I was 15 years old, and don't think there was any opportunity to go into farming. So I went and did something completely different. And I had a really good career. I was a filmmaker, so I shall be judging your film quality. I was a filmmaker, a professional filmmaker for 20 years plus, and I had a wonderful experience doing that. But I was becoming very frustrated with what I was doing. I started, when I was young, I started making music videos, and I ended up directing music videos for many years, but then slowly got sort of sucked into the world of commercials, and I started losing the love for it. And particularly whilst we were living in the United States, whilst we were living in California, I think my concerns about ecology and my growing interest in food and my dissatisfaction with using all my energies to make an advert for another dumbass product just started to not add up. So when we came back to the UK, I was feeling fairly frustrated, but I'd already started whilst we were living in San Francisco. We had a little plot in a community garden, and we grew a little bit of vegetables and some flowers, and that was very enjoyable. And then we came back to London, and I got a little allotment in the East End of London, where we grew some vegetables, and I was feeling more passionate about that than making films, and through a whole series of various different events that I won't go into, but essentially I talked to Alicia about potentially me changing career, and you were very hugely supportive of that move. You should say what you were doing previously.
Well, I worked for many years in the contemporary visual arts. I worked as a a gallery educator and a curator, and for many years. And I sort of transitioned in terms of my work as well, because I worked actually in Wales when we first moved out here for an arts organization, but then they kind of collapsed when the Arts Council started taking all the arts apart. And then I had always written. I used to also be a art reviewer as well. And I kind of moved over to writing about food and farming, which I've done for a long time now.
It was very difficult to find a way of training, a way of learning. The traditional agricultural colleges in the UK, there are less and less of them. They are very much about conventional chemical farming practice still. There were only 2 places offering degree courses in the UK which were for organic farming. I was only interested in the organic sector, and both of those were going to be very theoretical. I would have spent 2 years in a classroom, and I would probably come out on my way to training as an agronomist. And I actually wanted to be a grower, a producer of food. So it was very difficult to work out how to do that. And so for me, when I started to make that change, I read a lot of books. I was always interested in reading about this. I talked to a lot of people, and the further I got into this, the more people I talked to, and the more of a peer group that I'd established or became a part of. But also, I've literally volunteered on a local organic farm. Whilst we were living in London, I found a place where I could go and volunteer, which was in shooting distance of London. It wasn't very far away, about 35 minutes in the car, 40 minutes in the car. And I volunteered there a few days a week. And then suddenly that became a job for a few days a week. And I really was enjoying it. And I was still balancing being a filmmaker at this point. And at that point, I really talked to Alicia about and said, I really do want to do this. I like this. This is where I think that my future lies. And so I started to look for a much more serious job. So I went to a farm down in Hampshire, and we moved out of London, and we moved to the south coast of England, not far away from where I'd grown up. So it's not a place that I really wanted to move to. It's not an area I particularly like. But I went and I started as entry level just as a field worker on a crew which was predominantly Eastern European. I was the anomaly, strangely a British guy working with a lot of Poles, a lot of Bulgarians, really hard field work. I learned a huge amount on a big organic farm, and where there was a head grower there, and I kind of became sort of slightly like his right-hand person. I think probably because my grasp of English was strong, and also because I was really keen. I was reading all the books. I really wanted to learn, and I pushed very hard at it. And then the most remarkable thing happened after I hadn't been there for that long.
About 6 months.
About 6 months. The head grower upped and left, and the farm owner, and this is a really big farm. It was 400 acres plus 50 acres of vegetables. The farm owner turned around to me and said, "You want to do this? You want to be the head grower?" And suddenly I was just thrown into a very big operation as the head grower. And I became the head grower there. And then I became the farm manager for the big farm, which was, so then we had sheep, cattle, pigs, hundreds and hundreds of poultry and veg, and it was a big learning experience. But I'm not really scared of stuff like that, because I learnt from making films, that you get offered opportunities once or twice and you give it your best shot and try and make it work. And so I'm quite brave, so and it felt like a great opportunity to learn while somebody else was paying for me to make mistakes. So I did that. But I think all of the time that we were doing that, I knew I didn't really want to work for anyone else. We wanted to do it for ourselves. And I think, both of us were on that journey. It's just
Yeah, well, and you also did, towards the end, we did start looking for other places.
Yeah, we started looking for other places.
And also, I think that also led on to starting to look for farms as well. So both, I think you were both kind of looking for potential positions.
Yeah.
But also, to kind of step up again.
I think we always felt that we probably wanted to do it for ourselves.
But I think that was always the kind of end game, was to set up by ourselves.
I'd always worked freelance, and I found being employed really weird.
Yeah, you didn't like that.
I didn't like it. And, the other thing, early on in that journey, we also started to think about how we would finance this, and we started talking to sustainable banks and letting people know that we were out there, what we wanted to do, how we were going to potentially raise the money to do this. So that was part of the journey as well.
Yeah. And we looked for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And we started sort of in the Southwest, and relatively quickly realized it's just too expensive. You can't touch anything with a house and land for less than £1 million. Probably now £2 million, I would imagine.
If we had been younger, maybe that idea of buying land and then trying to sue for planning permission and living in a caravan for a few years or something like that would have appealed. But I think because we were starting, we were a bit older, we already had
kids.
We had one child at that point. We had Tallulah. We didn't want to make it that hard. So we wanted to buy a place which had somewhere we could live as well.
Yeah, which was not easy.
So we ended up in Wales because, and a lot of that is economic, because it was just one of the last places we could afford. This is not ideal growing land. It's hard land to grow vegetables on. Climate's difficult. In certain respects, if you were a conventional agronomist, you'd probably go, you don't want to try and grow veg here. But I think that's bullshit. I think that we can always grow veg.
No, I shouldn't say that.
I would say the way to describe it is what's that description? It's like we seem to get up before we go to bed. It's like we never stop working. The hours are ridiculously long. So
we
day
do
here,
take breaks. We do
take breaks, but
a
regular, a work week never ends. We work all of the time. I think there's that, but I think that's farming. That's just generally farming.
Yeah.
It's always hard. That's something you take on, but it's particularly difficult. So our day starts very early, and generally regularly finishes very late. Usually with supper at some point, quite late. And it depends really where we are during our year, what part of the year we're in, as to what we're doing. But essentially, every day is the same in the sense of we produce vegetables on the farm, which we sell to people who live very locally to the farm. And our day is dominated by growing those vegetables, tending those vegetables, selling those vegetables, delivering those vegetables, coming back to it again. That's pretty much it. That's what we do. What we produce, we sell within a range of around about 28 miles of the farm in any direction. It's a hyper-local business. It's run on a shoestring. It's, in many respects, it's what I think an American term you'd call it a ma and pa operation. It's a ma and pa operation. We've got help. We have a few employees. We certainly enjoy and work with woofers and other volunteers, but we do employ people, and the farm can run without volunteers if it has to, but it's not easy. But we, I think that essentially what we do every day is we grow veg, sell veg, talk about veg, maybe eat some at the end of the day.
it's tricky.
It did.
It's very tricky. It did. Yeah, I mean, I think the farm has gone up, down, and around actually over the years. You know, I think there was.
We started off strong.
Yeah, we did, but we also, you know, we had a pretty lean crew. It was basically you doing most of the growing with. We had apprentices the first 4 years.
Yeah, no, 5 years actually.
5 years.
Yeah. They were paid apprentices.
Paid apprentices. And we didn't do any woofing. Woofing kind of came after that, around 2014, I think.
Yeah, I think there was definitely overlap because we had woofers here when Nick was here. People talk about that.
Yeah. So, and then when the pandemic hit was when we actually started to take on kind of. I think maybe that's not true. Maybe we had started to take on labor, but more intermittently. But when the pandemic hit, we ended up, you know, Lou became a key worker and stayed one until.
That's our daughter to Lou.
To, you know, sort of when she went off to university. And Claire joined us also during the pandemic. And then we've had assistant growers from 2019, I think. 2018.
Yeah, something like that.
More consistently.
Yeah.
Keeping labor is really difficult.
Yeah,
because
really
most of the
hard.
labor is young, and they're often looking to, you know, kind of move on or
go traveling. Or something
something. So that's been. Quite tricky, and the finances of the farm have always been difficult. You know, they've. I mean, the pandemic was, I think, probably when we had the most income coming in. But we've managed.
Yeah,
it's not a profession which gives you lots of money.
We have
on a small
one thing
scale,
which
but
we
we
haven't mentioned as well is that there is diversification on our farm, as well as doing the vegetables. We run courses here that bring some money in, and we also have our holiday cottages, which we converted here.
Yeah, the holiday cottages.
Which diversify our farming income.
Yeah, and they're also a really key income stream because I always say, you know, just at the point in the spring when we're kind of hemorrhaging cash, buying seeds, and, you know, all kinds of stuff is going out the door, you know, then the holiday lets start to come in and pick up. Now that's been different this year because, you know, I think this has been kind of quite extraordinary the last, you know, I would say last year, just because of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And and a kind of turn in the climate, like I think the weather's really been difficult on people coming out for holidays, and the amount of rain that we had, and
money's tight.
Money's tight because
in the
of
UK
the cost
economy.
of living.
Cost of living is really tight, but it's still very cheap to fly abroad. So, you know, the interest rate is killing us at the moment. That's been a big challenge.
Yeah.
Brexit is a fucking disaster for our business, so, you know, that really does.
Not just our business.
No, but generally, you know, it's the most stupid thing, but that really impacts us. So yeah, costs are up, profitability is down. Yeah, it's not great.
It's a difficult period.
Yeah. So on question one, or the first part of that, no, we don't. We do buy in. What we try to grow as much as we can here that we produce ourselves. And for our vegetable boxes and for our farmers market, really from around about August, we shouldn't be buying anything in, and then till about January, February. But we're running late this year. We have, as our box scheme has got bigger, started buying more in. And we run this as, we try to be a super seasonal to the UK. So we really buy in from other UK producers. So it's what's in season here. There are some exceptions to that. UK onions run out very early. There's not much storage in such as damp conditions, so we do end up on Dutch onions through most of the winter. But this year is an exception because everyone's having a hard time. So we're buying in more this year, and we're also buying in more through this hungry gap. We've been buying in more from Europe as well, because no one has anything. No one's being able to produce stuff, and this is a real issue with our changing climate and the way we view that. On the farm here, we grow around about I can't remember. I did it for the Soil Association. I think we were doing 72 different crops here over the course of the season, and so that's everything from berries to potatoes, from beetroot to peaches. There are multiple crops, and then there are multiple subspecies within that. So in the brassicas, there are 4 types of kale, there are 7 types of cabbages, and then they are sown repeatedly at different times. So we have this continuity. It's very complex. It's a very complex system. But we will definitely be buying in. We're currently buying in carrots. We're currently buying in bits to top up with. So sometimes we've got some of the stuff ourselves, but we haven't got quite enough. Lettuces this week is a good example. I think in our boxes this week we need 97 lettuces, and 45 of them are from this farm, and 40 of them will be in from another local farm. It's always certified organic. As far as what we eat, I would say that pretty much all the vegetables we have produced, except for those that we've also bought in from other farmers that we know.
Sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes, things like that. But a great deal of it we produce ourselves, and we also cook. We cook from scratch all of the time. So we don't grow wheat, but we always make bread. We produce eggs. I regularly make pasta from scratch. Not always, but regularly. But we definitely do buy in other produce. I don't know an organic farmer that's producing olive oil anywhere in the UK. We produce meat here as well, really for us. We do sell a bit, but not very much. It's really more about... So the reason we keep cows is not for milk or meat in particular. It's certainly not for milk. We never milk our cows. We naturally wean as well, so we don't separate calves off at birth. But it's mostly about conservation grazing. It's actually more about closing the system on the fertility. So the cattle are out on a part of the farm. They just eat the grass and then shit it back onto the field, and we keep the fertility here. When we arrived at the farm, the fertility had been stripped out of this farm by graziers bringing cattle or sheep on, eating the grass and then taking them elsewhere, and then coming in and taking a cut of hay or a cut of silage and taking it off the farm. And so the fertility here was on the floor. We thought it was far better to have some animals eating that grass, that pasture, and sitting it back onto the fields. And the same with poultry, and the same also to a lesser extent, but with the pigs, because anything which is compost, not food waste, but compost waste, the pigs will clean up and eat, and then we eat that meat. So we really don't buy very much meat at all.
No, in terms of
we really.
If we do buy meat, it's from somebody we know directly. Like we occasionally, like Patrick and his fantastic sausages. And we occasionally will eat chicken. Chicken is one of those things that's so pervasive among culture. Everybody eats it. Everybody doesn't think twice about what they're doing,
Yeah.
eating chicken. And so
chicken
very
is cheap.
occasionally,
And-
yeah,
and
because
it's
yeah.
ridiculously too cheap.
Yeah. So when we eat chicken, we, make sure we know where it's come from, who's produced it.
And it's an expensive meal. So
Yeah.
it's a real rarity. I reckon we eat maybe twice a year. We eat three
No,
times
we
a
eat
year.
a little bit more than that.
Yeah, if we buy bits, but
Yeah.
if we were to roast a whole chicken, that's
Yeah.
probably it's a
Yeah.
real rarity.
Yeah. And it is just, chickens traditionally would have been high-end food, and they're not anymore, and they're treated terribly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's something that, again, when we think about the meat that we eat, we consider. And that's one also, I think, when you can raise your own animals and you
Yeah.
have a sense of where they're coming through, how
Yeah.
they've lived, and I think that's really important.
We were both vegetarian for a long while. I was
Yeah.
vegetarian for nearly 30 years, and you were like 20 years. or
No,
so,
15. Yeah.
Yeah. So we both came from very different culinary backgrounds, if you like, of what we were eating, our dietary backgrounds. So it's quite interesting to, in later life, to rethink that. And that was a slow journey into eating meat, but now I embrace it. I really enjoy eating meat, but I do want to know the provenance. I want to know about it, and the best way for me to do that is to actually raise the animals myself. And I have to see very personally, but I've never felt more connected with my food than when I'm eating an animal which I've raised, because there is an emotional attachment, obviously, and I've gone through quite a lot with that animal, and I've taken that animal to slaughter, and it's a very old relationship that I think that all human beings would once have had, and you don't have that relationship with a barcode. When you scan a barcode and it goes beep, it's a piece of bacon under a piece of foil. You know nothing about it. And I actually think we really need to relearn those relationships, because it would be far better for animal husbandry, for animal health, but also for planetary health, for the health of the soil. So, we do produce meat. It's very much a kind of side thing, but it is integral to the way we eat in this house.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a community here of people. I mean, I think that it's, when you look at the kind of, I don't know how many people we have just in this country, and I can't help thinking in terms of, like our box scheme. I mean, we go up and down the, a pretty wide area and feed, between 90 and maybe 110, 120 people.
No, that's not true. That's really not true. So,
families. Maybe I should say 120
so
families.
That's about 120 families when we're large, and 90 families. So you're starting to get the numbers there. And then the market itself, the farmers market itself, probably does that amount again. So, it's certainly...
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't kept in the
so
market.
we're starting to creep,
But still, I still think that there either it's a fraction of how many people don't eat.
Yeah, I agree.
Fresh, wholesome food.
It's also reflective also on what the production here in Wales is that, Wales imports, 78% of all its food is imported. So,
is it still that?
Yeah, it's
I thought
really high. It's really, really high.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, and in vegetables, that's like off the scale. It's much higher than that. So, there's just no production here. So we desperately need more production, but it's got to be better production.
Yeah. But there are, but we do, I think we have a very loyal group of people. Some of our box scheme customers have been with us
for years.
Yeah, like at least 10 plus years. And then we have inevitably have people who come and go over the years. and whatnot. So it waxes and wanes, but it's been pretty consistent.
Yeah.
In California.
Yeah. I think it's funny actually because I'm just thinking about the question itself, and I think what I've learned is that my relationship, which I used to think was with nature, I don't ever think of it like that anymore. The thing which it's taught me is that I'm just another part of nature. You know, that it's actually, and that I think that as human beings we often separate ourselves off from that, and I've really realised that I'm just part of it, you know, and it's not a kind of existential kind of outside of standing away, that I'm just part of it. I find it very difficult to detract myself from our political systems, which I think, you know, capitalism is really overrated, hugely overrated, and deeply problematic, I think. And the way that we look to market economics rather than ecology and deeper things, those are the things I think about. And I also.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, I think you don't do this unless you have committed values to, you know, the wider ecology and, you know, life, you know, the life beyond human life.
Yeah.
You know, whether
it's why it's painted on the barn door down there. It says ecology now on our barn door. I painted it there because it was something I've been looking at that slogan since the early 1970s, and it was still calling for an idea to think about ecology, and I wanted it to be the mantra of my mantra of where I start my day every day. Is I look at that, I'm always thinking about that. How can I still produce food, but in a way, what I'm bored of, let's rephrase it. What I'm bored of, and actually what now has started to make me quite angry, is I'm really bored of single species farming. And when I say that, I'm talking about a bigger thing than the understanding that we have of monoculture being, you produce one crop. I want to flip that around, and what I'm really bored of is this idea that farming is always sort of only about providing for human beings, for food for human beings. And and every time I'm out in the field, I feel this has to be a shared planet. It has to be shared with the wider ecology, and there's still a way that I can produce food here for human beings and have biodiversity.
Yeah.
It's just harder. It just means a lot more hand weeding. It just means a lot more treading carefully. It means a lot more being prepared to walk away from something and saying, if we do this, we'll get the crop, but it will be at the detriment of the wider ecology of the farm. I could go on there now and I could compact it with a tractor, and we'd probably rescue a crop, and we'd probably make some money from that. But if I'm going to damage the soil, if I'm going to damage the wider ecology, no, hold back on doing it. Take the hit. And unfortunately, that's what farming doesn't do regularly. I've got acres of weeds out there. You know, some of those weeds are really problematic because they're giving us a weed seed burden, which we're going to have for years. But there's a patch out there close to where you're harvesting, where the weeds are thick with tufty grass, really high tufted grass, and all of that is giving off seed, which is going to be a problem. But early through the beginning of this season, whilst I was out there, I started seeing ground nesting birds which are so endangered and so under pressure, and we're like a haven here for them. And I just felt I have to keep that. And that's going to make my year harder and harder and harder. But we will have those birds. And if we don't do that, if we don't make those kind of actions, we lose that. And then we're single species farming. We're just thinking about human beings. And that's a really boring planet. So it makes me kind of angry sometimes. But it's how I feel about it.
I mean, my writing is very about, spreading the word, about writing on issues that I'm concerned about, and that's been a kind of key part. I think it is. You have to, spread the word. That's why I I work in an environment where, I both work as an editor, bringing other people's work to fruition, as well as writing my own, and have, written extensively throughout my life. Well, maybe not throughout my life, but through my, certainly from the time I sort of grew up. And I think that's very important, because, how else do you start, without putting stuff out there? And I think we both are very vocal. I mean, you're very vocal as well.
Yeah.
And you write from time to time, not as...
I do write, but I speak a lot.
Yeah.
I get involved with I talk quite a lot of sort of food and farming conferences. I get asked to do those a lot.
Yeah.
I try and do outreach, and I'm an activist. Yeah, I'm very activist. I do a lot of that. But
here.
Aging.
Or that you do have.
Yes. I would agree with that. Aging is number one at the moment.
Aging is something, we make light of it and we joke about it, but it's one of the things that you don't consider when you start. When you start farming, the other thing that is in none of the books is it's not taught anywhere. It's never, ever pointed out. If you go to university, if you go to college, you go to university, they never tell you this. If you read any of the farming books, they never tell you this. You read the farming press, they never tell you this. When you start a farm, you walk on there and there's a big bloody green button. It says on. You press the on button and then wherever you look, there is no off button. That doesn't exist. Once you turn it on, there is no off button. And
it is true. I mean, I think it's really... that's one of the issues with farmers, is that they work constantly.
It might be there. It may be when that stops working, then that is the off button, But
it's not particularly healthy.
It's not a particularly healthy way of being healthy. But it's also that, there is no off button. But one of the things you don't really realise, and for us, we hadn't taken into account that. We work bloody long hours and we work really hard, but we're not getting younger, and that's quite hard. The realisation that it's harder to make the days every day,
I don't know. I mean, I think
we're just starting to have those conversations with Tallulah, maybe. Tallulah has...
That's a lot of it. I think it,
has expressed some interest now in...
But whether she will,
take the farm, I don't know.
Take that. Yeah, I mean, a big question for us is, what will we do? What will we do with the farm? Will we,
I don't want to see it absorbed back into a conventional farm.
No. No, I think, our ideal would be when we're ready to step away, assuming we are at any point, we would probably want the farm to go to maybe a community-based, something that would take it on properly as a farm and have the manpower to really, but how that plays out, because on the other hand also our you know, we need an income to help us as we get older as well. So it's tricky. I think it'll be tricky, but I think we want to see the farm stay a farm.
Yeah, definitely.
And to have it be useful,
Yeah.
you know.
Farm.
I think
Have many children when you're young.
I also think, though, and I think it's one of the things in farming that comes up a lot. I think building connections and community with other farmers
Yeah.
is really important. It's when, you know, farming is one of those professions that is one of the top in terms of mental health issues.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's changing in part.
To do it with, I would say this is that I don't think either of us could do this alone. I mean, it is, well, I certainly couldn't do this without you.
Yeah, no.
You know, I
no.
think that actually it really is, you have to be working with someone that you deeply care about, love, or have a relationship with, or a working relationship with, that you can do, because this would be really difficult to do alone. So sometimes we're asked, what's the best thing you've produced? What over the years, what's the best thing you've produced? And I've been reaching and saying this a lot. I actually think it's about the contact we've had with particularly the younger people who've come here as volunteers, actually. And because for many people this has been an opportunity to just be outside and be in the countryside. But for us, it's actually brought a lot of memories. A lot of people who still know that we still talk about. We've had well over 200, nearly 300 volunteers now over the years. And talking about memory, I have a lot of very nice memories of people who've been here, and they're continuing, because those are continuing relationships. And I think that those are some of the most important things that we've done. It's actually that, and those conversations that we have around dinners, you know.